The grand ballroom of the Crystal Palace restaurant sparkled under the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. It was the night of Diana Reeves's annual charity gala, an event that always attracted the city's elite. Women in designer gowns and men in tailored tuxedos mingled, their laughter mixing with the soft jazz played by a live band in the corner. Waiters moved smoothly between groups, offering champagne and tiny appetizers on silver trays. Diana stood in the center of it all, a vision in her ivory silk dress that cost more than what most people in the city made in 3 months. Her blonde hair was pulled back in an elegant updo, showing off diamond earrings that caught the light with every slight movement of her head. At 52, she still commanded attention, her skin glowing from regular treatments at the most exclusive spa in town. Another successful event. "Diana," said Richard Thompson, the mayor, raising his champagne flute in a toast. "You've outdone yourself again." Diana's lips curved into a practiced smile. "It's all for a good cause. The Reeves Foundation is committed to fighting hunger in our communities." She gestured to the banner hanging above the stage. "Nourishing hope, fighting food. Insecurity." The irony was lost on the crowd of wealthy donors who had just paid $500 per plate for a dinner, where most of them had only picked at their food before moving on to networking and socializing. As the night wore on, the guests began to leave, their luxury cars lining up outside the restaurant's entrance. Inside, the staff started clearing tables covered with barely touched gourmet meals: pan-seared salmon with truffle risotto, filet mignon with roasted vegetables, and chocolate soufflés that many guests had been too full of appetizers and alcohol to enjoy. It was just past 10 o'clock when Zoe Williams approached the restaurant. The 12-year-old girl hesitated at the bottom of the marble steps, gathering her courage. Her dark brown hair was neatly braided, and she wore a clean but visibly worn jacket against the cool evening air. She had walked nearly 2 miles from the apartment she shared with her grandmother in the Oak Meadows neighborhood. Zoe had seen the advertisements for the gala in the newspaper her grandmother used to line their kitchen drawer. She knew these fancy events always had leftover food, and their refrigerator at home was nearly empty. Her grandmother's next paycheck wouldn't come for 3 more days. Taking a deep breath, Zoe climbed the steps and peered through the glass doors. She could see workers clearing tables inside, throwing untouched food into trash bags. Gathering her courage, she pushed open one of the heavy doors and stepped inside. The sudden warmth of the restaurant enveloped her as she stood quietly just inside the entrance. A few remaining guests were saying their goodbyes near the coat check, while others waited for the valet to bring their cars around. Zoe spotted a young waiter with a kind face and approached him. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I was wondering if maybe you have any leftover food that you're going to throw away. My grandma and we don't have much at home right now." The waiter looked at her with sympathy. "Let me check with the kitchen," he whispered. "Wait here, okay?" Before the waiter could return, Diana emerged from a private room with 3 of her closest friends. They were laughing about something when Diana spotted Zoe standing near the entrance. Her smile vanished instantly. "Who let you in here?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to make nearby conversations pause. Zoe took a step back. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I just thought since the event is over if there was food going to be thrown away." Diana's eyes narrowed as she took in Zoe's appearance. The worn jacket, the scuffed shoes, the hopeful expression now fading into fear. "This is a private establishment," she said coldly. "Not a soup kitchen." "I didn't mean any harm," Zoe said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We just don't have much food at home, and I saw all the leftovers." "That's not my problem," Diana snapped, her voice rising. "This is exactly what's wrong with society today. People thinking they're entitled to handouts instead of working for what they want." The remaining guests turned to stare. Some looked uncomfortable while others nodded in agreement with Diana. "My grandma works 3 jobs," Zoe said, a flash of pride momentarily overcoming her embarrassment. "But the grocery store in our neighborhood closed down, and now we have to take the bus to get food, and that costs money too, and—" "Enough." Diana cut her off. "I don't need your life story. This is a charity fundraiser, not a charity itself. We have proper channels for assistance." One of Diana's friends placed a manicured hand on her arm. "Diana, maybe we could—" "No, Patricia. If we give to every person who walks in off the street, we'll have a line around the block by morning." Diana turned and signaled to the security guard standing near the door.
"Please escort this person
out of the building. The security guard, a tall man with a stoic expression, hesitated for a moment before approaching Zoe. "Come on, kid," he said, not unkindly. "Time to go." "You should be ashamed," Diana continued, her voice carrying through the now silent ballroom. "Sneaking into a private event, trying to guilt people into giving you things. This is why I have security at these events." Tears welled in Zoe's eyes, but she blinked them back, refusing to cry in front of these strangers. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." Several people had pulled out their phones, recording the interaction. One woman in a blue dress looked particularly troubled, glancing between Diana and Zoe with growing discomfort. As the security guard gently guided Zoe toward the exit, the young waiter rushed back from the kitchen, a small package wrapped in foil in his hands. He stopped when he saw what was happening. "What is that?" Diana demanded, spotting the package. The waiter hesitated. "Just some leftover food that was going to be thrown out anyway." "I thought—" "Put it back," Diana ordered. "We don't encourage this kind of behavior. Next time she'll bring friends, and then what? We'll be running a food bank instead of a 5-star restaurant." The waiter looked at Zoe apologetically but returned to the kitchen with the package. Zoe's shoulders slumped in defeat. As Zoe was escorted out into the cool night, Diana turned to her friends with an exaggerated sigh. "Can you believe the nerve? Walking into a private function demanding handouts? This is why I say we need to be careful about which charities we support. Too many people looking for easy solutions instead of working their way up like I did." What Diana didn't notice was that the woman in the blue dress was still recording, capturing every word of her rant. Nor did she see the troubled expressions on the faces of the restaurant staff, who exchanged glances behind her back. Outside, Zoe began her long walk home, empty-handed. The lights of the city twinkled around her, storefronts and restaurants closing for the night. Through some windows, she could see families sitting together, sharing meals, living lives so different from her own. Her stomach growled, reminding her of its emptiness, but she held her head high. She didn't see the waiter who had tried to help her slip out the side door of the restaurant. She didn't know that he was following her with a small package of food hidden under his jacket, determined to catch up with her before she got too far. And she couldn't have known that the short video clip of Diana's outburst was already being uploaded to social media, where it would begin a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. The morning after the charity gala, Diana Reeves woke in her penthouse apartment overlooking the city park. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows as her housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, brought in a breakfast tray with fresh squeezed orange juice, avocado toast, and a small bowl of organic berries. "Good morning, Mrs. Reeves," Mrs. Chen said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "Your coffee is prepared just how you like it." Diana stretched and reached for her phone, scrolling through emails and messages as she did every morning. Her perfectly manicured finger paused mid-scroll when she saw a text from her friend Patricia. "Have you seen what's going around online? Call me." Frowning, Diana opened her social media app and immediately saw what Patricia was referring to. Someone had posted a video of her confrontation with the young girl at the restaurant the previous night. The 15-second clip showed Diana at her worst moment saying, "This is a charity fundraiser, not a charity itself," followed by her ordering security to remove the girl. The comments below the post were less than flattering. "Ironic that she's raising money to fight hunger while turning away a hungry child. All that food probably went straight in the trash. Shameful waste. Typical rich people. They want the credit for caring without actually helping anyone directly." Diana's cheeks flushed with anger. The video had been cut to make her look as bad as possible. It didn't show the girl sneaking into a private event or Diana explaining about proper channels for assistance. She immediately called her publicist, Blake. "Have you seen this ridiculous video?" she demanded when he answered. "I have," Blake replied, his voice carefully neutral. "It's gaining traction. Already at 20,000 views and climbing. Well, do something about it," Diana snapped. "It's completely taken out of context. I want it removed." "That's not really how social media works these days," Blake said. "I think our best approach is to issue a statement explaining the situation from your perspective." "Fine," Diana huffed. "Draft something about how I've dedicated my life to charitable causes. As in how this girl disrupted a private fundraising event. Mention the health code violations of giving away prepared food, and make sure to highlight that my foundation has proper channels for helping people in need." While Diana was damage controlling her public image, Across town in a small two-bedroom apartment in the Oak Meadows neighborhood, Zoe Williams was helping her grandmother get ready for work, Grandma Rose, a woman in her early 60s with gray-streaked hair and tired eyes that still managed to sparkle with warmth, winced as she pulled on her uniform for the hospital where she worked as a cleaning staff member. "Your arthritis bothering you again?" Zoe asked, bringing her grandmother's comfortable shoes. "Nothing to worry about, sunshine," Rose smiled, though the lines around her mouth deepened with pain. "Just these old bones complaining about the weather changing." Zoe knew better. Her grandmother worked long hours at the hospital during the day, then took evening shifts at a local laundromat 3 times a week, and spent weekends cleaning houses for extra cash. Years of physical labor had taken their toll on her body, but Rose never complained. "I made you a sandwich for lunch," Zoe said, handing her grandmother a paper bag. Inside was a peanut butter sandwich made with the last of their bread. They had been stretching their food since the neighborhood's only affordable grocery store had closed 3 months earlier. Rose accepted the bag with a grateful smile. "You're such a good girl, always thinking of others." She hesitated before asking, "Did you eat something too?" "Yes," Zoe lied, not wanting to worry her grandmother. In truth, she'd given Rose the last of their food. Her own stomach growled emptily, but she ignored it. It wasn't the first time she'd gone hungry, and her grandmother needed her strength for work. What Zoe didn't mention was her failed attempt to get food from the restaurant the night before. She was too embarrassed about how that wealthy woman had treated her, making her feel like a criminal for asking about food that was going to be thrown away anyway. She especially didn't want her grandmother to know she'd walked all that way alone at night, which she knew would worry her. As Rose left for work, promising to bring home something for dinner with her paycheck, Zoe tidied their small apartment. Their home was modest but spotlessly clean, with carefully mended furniture and walls adorned with family photos. In most of the pictures, Zoe was younger, standing between her parents, happy faces frozen in time before the car accident that had taken them both 3 years ago. The apartment intercom buzzed unexpectedly. Zoe approached it cautiously. "Hello?" she answered. "Delivery for Williams," came the response. Confused, Zoe pressed the button to let the delivery person up. When she opened the door, she found a young man holding a large paper bag. "I didn't order anything," she said. The delivery man checked his phone. "This is from Tom at the Crystal Palace. Said to tell you he's sorry about last night." Zoe accepted the bag with surprise. Inside were several containers of food, all dishes from the previous night's gala, carefully packed. There was also a note that simply read, "Not all of us agree with what happened." "Tom," tears pricked at Zoe's eyes. She hadn't expected kindness from anyone at that fancy restaurant, especially after how she'd been treated. The food would feed her and Grandma Rose for several days. Meanwhile, Diana's statement had been released online, explaining her side of the story. It emphasized her foundation's work fighting hunger through proper channels and expressed concern about unauthorized individuals entering private events. She pointed out the health code regulations that prevented restaurants from giving away leftover food to just anyone who asks. The statement did little to calm the growing outrage. In fact, it seemed to make things worse. People began digging into Diana's charitable foundation, questioning how much of the money actually went to helping people versus paying for lavish fundraisers and administrative costs. By midday, local news stations had picked up the story. "Charity Gala Controversy," read the ticker at the bottom of the screen as reporters stood outside the Crystal Palace restaurant. "Sources tell us that the young girl was simply asking for leftover food that would otherwise be thrown away," one reporter said. This incident has sparked a conversation about food waste in our city, where an estimated 30% of all food ends up in landfills, while many neighborhoods qualify as food deserts. Diana watched the coverage from her office at the Reeves Foundation, growing increasingly frustrated. This was supposed to be a non-story. Why wouldn't people let it go? She had dedicated years to building her reputation as a philanthropist. She wasn't going to let one incident with some random girl ruin everything. She called Blake again. "This isn't working. The statement isn't enough. We need to control the narrative better." "I understand your frustration," Blake replied carefully, "but I think we need to be strategic here. Fighting back too hard might make you look worse." "Then what do you suggest?" Diana demanded. "We need to show, not tell," Blake explained. Let's organize a high-profile food distribution event through the foundation. Get some good photos of you personally handing out meals in an underserved community. That will help shift the focus. Fine, Diana agreed reluctantly. Set it up, somewhere visible but safe. She hesitated before adding, not Oak Meadows, though. Pick another neighborhood. Blake was curious about the specific exclusion but didn't question it. I'll get it arranged for early next week. Across town, Zoe returned to school after the weekend. Oak Meadows Middle School was an aging building with outdated textbooks and overworked teachers, but Zoe loved learning. Her favorite teacher, Mrs. Rivera, noticed something was off about her usually enthusiastic student. Everything okay, Zoe? She asked after math class when Zoe had struggled to concentrate. Zoe hesitated before answering. My grandma's having a hard time right now. Since the grocery store closed, it's been difficult to get food sometimes. Mrs. Rivera's face softened with concern. Many families are struggling since food baskets shut down. Have you heard anything about why they closed so suddenly? Zoe shook her head. Grandma said someone bought the building and didn't renew their lease. Now the closest affordable store is 3 bus rides away. Mrs. Rivera frowned. That's happening all over this neighborhood. Businesses that have been here for decades suddenly closing. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small grocery store gift card. Here, this might help a little bit. Zoe started to protest, but Mrs. Rivera insisted. It's not much, but it might make things a bit easier this week. What neither of them knew was that a local reporter named Lee Chen had been investigating the sudden closure of businesses in Oak Meadows for months. The video of Diana Reeves and Zoe had caught his attention, not just because of the confrontation, but because it connected to a much larger story he was pursuing about gentrification and the systematic dismantling of support systems in lower-income neighborhoods. Lee had been collecting evidence of a pattern: affordable businesses closing, property values rising, and longtime residents being forced out. He just hadn't been able to figure out who was behind it all. The companies listed on property records were all shell corporations with hidden ownership. As Lee dug deeper into Diana Reeves's background following the viral video, something caught his eye, a connection he hadn't seen before. One of Diana's investment companies had the same mailing address as one of the shell corporations that had recently purchased 3 properties in Oak Meadows, including the building that had housed Food Basket Grocery. This could be the missing link, Lee muttered to himself as he connected the dots on the investigation board in his apartment. But why would a woman who runs a foundation fighting hunger buy out the only grocery store in a food desert? The question drove him to dig deeper, unaware that what he would discover next would shock even his most cynical journalist instincts. Lee Chen's apartment looked like a detective's war room. Papers covered every surface, photos connected by red string decorated one wall, and sticky notes filled in the gaps. 3 empty coffee cups sat beside his laptop, evidence of another late night of investigation. For 7 years, Lee had worked for the City Chronicle, building a reputation for uncovering stories that others missed. But this investigation into Oak Meadows' mysterious property buyouts had consumed him like no other. Something about seeing that young girl being thrown out of Diana Reeves's charity gala had struck a nerve. It just doesn't add up, he muttered, tapping his pen against his notepad. On his wall hung a map of Oak Meadows with red pins marking recently closed businesses: the grocery store, a family-owned pharmacy, a laundromat, and several other small shops that had served the community for decades. Blue pins marked properties that had been renovated and now stood empty or had been converted to upscale businesses that most local residents couldn't afford. Lee picked up a folder labeled Cornerstone Properties LLC, the shell company that had purchased the grocery store building. On paper, it looked like any other real estate investment firm, but when Lee had visited the listed office address, he'd found only a mail forwarding service. "What are you hiding, Cornerstone?" he asked the empty room. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was his contact at the county records office. "Hey Lee, it's Vince. Got something interesting for you." "Those property tax records you asked about found a connection you might want to see. The tax payments for Cornerstone Properties are coming from an account at First Metropolitan Bank, same routing number as payments for Reeves Ventures." Lee sat up straighter. "You're saying Diana Reeves's investment company and this shell corporation are using the same bank account?" "Not exactly the same account, but definitely connected." "Like maybe sub-accounts under a parent company." This kind of structure is typically used when someone wants to keep different business interests separate, but still maintain control. Vince, you're a genius. Can you send me those records? Already on their way to your inbox. Just don't tell anyone where you got them, all right? After hanging up, Lee immediately checked his email. The records confirmed what Vince had said, a financial connection between Diana's legitimate business interests and the mysterious companies buying up Oak Meadows. But why? Lee wondered. What's the angle here? He turned back to his research on Diana Reeves. Born into wealth, educated at prestigious schools, married to and later divorced from banking executive Harold Reeves, who had died 5 years ago, leaving her his fortune. A fixture in high society, known for her charity work, especially the Reeves Foundation's food security initiatives. On the surface, nothing suggested why she would secretly buy property in a struggling neighborhood, only to force out businesses that served basic community needs. Lee decided to dig deeper into Diana's background. Most profiles of her mentioned she'd grown up in the wealthy enclave of Hillcrest Gardens, but Lee wanted to verify everything. He requested her birth records and began searching old high school yearbooks from the elite private school she supposedly attended. Strangely, he couldn't find her in any of them. Growing more suspicious, Lee expanded his search, looking at public records from before her marriage to Harold Reeves 25 years ago. That's when he found something odd. Diana Reeves's social security number had only been issued 26 years ago, when she would have been in her mid-20s. That made no sense unless she changed her identity, Lee whispered to himself. Working with this new theory, Lee began searching for women who disappeared or changed their names around that time. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack until he remembered something. Oak Meadows. On a hunch, Lee searched birth records from Oak Meadows Hospital from 55 years ago, scanning for female babies. Then he cross-referenced those names against school records, looking for anyone who disappeared from public records around the time Diana appeared in Harold Reeves's social circle. After hours of painstaking research, one name caught his attention: Denise Williams. Born at Oak Meadows Hospital 53 years ago, attended local schools until age 16, then seemingly vanished from all records. Her last known address was on Elm Street, now part of the area being bought up by Cornerstone Properties. Could it be? Lee wondered. He found an old high school yearbook photo of Denise Williams and placed it side by side with a current photo of Diana Reeves. Despite the obvious changes, the nose job, the blonde hair instead of dark brown, the different makeup style, the resemblance was undeniable. The shape of the eyes, the curve of the jawline, the distinctive way one eyebrow arched slightly higher than the other. Diana Reeves was Denise Williams. She had grown up in Oak Meadows, not Hillcrest Gardens. But why hide her past, and why target her old neighborhood for what appeared to be predatory development? Lee needed more evidence to connect the final dots. He drove to the Oak Meadows Public Library, where they kept archives of local newspapers going back decades. The elderly librarian, Mrs. Patel, was happy to help when Lee explained he was researching the history of the neighborhood. Such a shame what's happening here now, she sighed as she led him to the archives. This was once such a tight-knit community. For hours, Lee scrolled through microfilm records of the Oak Meadows Gazette, a small community paper that had ceased publication 10 years earlier. He was looking for anything about the Williams family. Finally, he found it, a small article from 25 years ago. Local family mourns daughter presumed dead. The article described how Jacob and Eleanor Williams had received notification that their daughter Denise, who had left home 6 years earlier, was believed to have died in a hostel fire while traveling overseas. The body was too badly burned for identification, but personal effects found at the scene were matched to Denise. She faked her own death, Lee realized. This was around the same time Diana had appeared in Harold Reeves's social circle. Digging further, Lee discovered that after Jacob and Eleanor Williams died, their only other child, Robert Williams, had inherited their modest home. Robert and his wife had later died in a car accident, leaving behind a young daughter, Zoe. The realization hit Lee like a thunderbolt. The girl from the video, the one Diana had thrown out of her charity gala, was her own niece. Lee sat back, stunned by the implications. Diana Reeves, formerly Denise Williams, had not only abandoned her family and faked her death to reinvent herself among the wealthy elite. She was now actively working to gentrify her old neighborhood. displacing the very community she had come from, including her own family members. But the biggest question remained, why? Why would she target her old neighborhood and her own flesh and blood? Lee's next stop was the county courthouse, where he searched property records for the Williams family home. Sure enough, it was now owned by Rose Williams, likely Robert's mother or grandmother who was raising Zoe. More troublingly, the property was currently under threat of foreclosure due to unpaid taxes. The taxes had increased dramatically after recent neighborhood improvement assessments tied to the very development projects that Cornerstone Properties had initiated. The pieces were finally fitting together. Diana Denise wasn't just buying up commercial properties. She was systematically making it impossible for long-time residents to stay in their homes through increased property taxes and removal of essential services like the grocery store. It was a classic gentrification playbook. Buy cheap, force out current residents, develop upscale properties, and sell high. But in this case, it came with the added cruelty of a woman deliberately harming her own family. Lee had one more stop to make before writing his story. He needed to talk to Rose Williams and her granddaughter Zoe. He wasn't just going to expose Diana Reeves. He wanted to give her victims a chance to tell their story. As Lee pulled up to the modest apartment building where the Williams family now lived, having lost their family home to foreclosure the previous year, he noticed a familiar car parked across the street, one of Diana Reeves's luxury vehicles with a custom license plate. Inside sat a man Lee recognized as one of Diana's personal assistants, apparently keeping watch on the building. She's monitoring them, Lee realized with a chill. Diana knew exactly who Zoe was and where she lived. The confrontation at the restaurant wasn't a random event. Diana had recognized her niece. But why would Diana care enough to have her niece watched, yet treat her so cruelly? What was she afraid of? The answer, Lee suspected, lay somewhere in the 25 years of secrets Diana had built her new life upon. And he was determined to uncover them all. As he approached the building, Lee made a decision. This story wasn't just about shady real estate deals or even about a wealthy woman's cruel treatment of a child asking for food. It was about a deliberate attempt to erase a past and destroy evidence of humble beginnings, even if that meant destroying lives in the process. Lee pressed the intercom button for the Williams apartment, rehearsing in his head how he would explain what he'd discovered. He knew the revelation would likely be painful for the family, but he also believed they deserved to know the truth. The intercom crackled. "Hello?" came a young voice. "Zoe's. Hi, my name is Lee Chen from the City Chronicle," he began. "I'm working on an important story, and I believe your family deserves to know some information I've uncovered. It's about Diana Reeves and her connection to your family." There was a long pause before Zoe responded, her voice suddenly cautious. "What do you mean, her connection to our family?" "I think it's better if I explain in person," Lee said. "Is your grandmother home?" "She's resting. She just got back from her hospital shift. Would it be okay if I came up to talk to both of you? I promise I wouldn't be here if it wasn't important." Another pause, then. "I'll need to ask my grandma." While waiting for a response, Lee glanced back at the car across the street. The man inside was now on his phone, looking agitated. Lee suspected he was calling Diana, reporting that a reporter was at the Williams apartment. Time was running short. Once Diana knew her secret was about to be exposed, there was no telling what she might do to protect herself. The intercom buzzed again. "Grandma says you can come up. We're in 3B. As Lee entered the building, he didn't notice the black SUV that pulled up behind Diana's assistant's car, nor the two men in suits who got out and followed him inside. The story he was about to break was bigger than he realized, and much more dangerous than he could have imagined. The Williams apartment was small but immaculately kept. Family photos lined the walls, images of happier times when Zoe's parents were still alive. Rose Williams sat in a worn armchair, her work uniform replaced by a simple house dress, her tired eyes watching Lee carefully as he explained who he was and why he had come. "I've been investigating property developments in Oak Meadows," Lee began, sitting on the edge of the couch where Zoe had directed him. "And I've discovered something that directly affects your family." Rose's expression remained guarded. "We already know we're losing our home. The property taxes keep going up, and with food basket closed, everything costs more now. We're barely hanging on. It's about who's behind all this, Lee said. The company buying properties in this neighborhood, including the grocery store building, is connected to Diana Reeves. Zoe's eyes widened. The mean lady from the restaurant? Lee nodded, then hesitated before continuing. He looked at Rose. Mrs. Williams, what I'm about to tell you might be difficult to hear. It involves your family history. Rose straightened in her chair. Go on. I have reason to believe that Diana Reeves is actually Denise Williams, your husband's sister who was reported dead 25 years ago. The color drained from Rose's face. She gripped the arms of her chair. That's not possible. I've compiled evidence, Lee said gently, opening his folder. Birth records, school photos, the timing of her disappearance and Diana's emergence in society. And most tellingly, the fact that her companies are specifically targeting this neighborhood, your family's neighborhood. Rose shook her head slowly, her eyes fixed on a point in the distance. Jacob always said there was something strange about Denise's death. No body to bury, just some personal items they said were found in the fire. Her voice trembled. But why would she do that? And why come back now to hurt us? Zoe moved to her grandmother's side, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Grandma, who is Denise? Your father's sister, Rose explained. She left home young, always said she was destined for bigger things than Oak Meadows could offer. When the news came that she had died overseas, your grandfather was heartbroken. He never really recovered. Lee pulled out old photographs, a yearbook picture of Denise Williams side by side with a recent photo of Diana Reeves. The resemblance is clear once you know what to look for. She's had cosmetic surgery, changed her hair color, but certain features remain the same. Rose stared at the photos, her expression shifting from disbelief to shock to anger. All these years, she's been alive, living in luxury while her own brother died thinking she was gone. And now she's trying to push us out of our home? Her voice broke. She looked right at Zoe, her own niece, and treated her like garbage. Did Diana recognize you? Lee asked Zoe. The girl shrugged. I don't think so. How could she? She's never met me. Actually, Rose interjected, she has. Once when you were very small. Your father invited her to your second birthday party before we knew about her death. She sent a gift but said she couldn't attend. Too busy with her high society life, I suppose. Lee made notes as Rose spoke. Mrs. Williams, do you have any photos from that time? Anything that might show Diana and your family together? Rose thought for a moment, then stood and went to a cabinet. She returned with an old photo album. Robert kept everything. He was sentimental like that. She flipped through pages until she found what she was looking for. Here. The only time Denise ever visited after she left home. The photo showed a younger Robert Williams with his arm around a woman who was unmistakably a younger, pre-surgery version of Diana Reeves. She looked uncomfortable, standing slightly apart from the family, designer sunglasses perched on her head. May I? Lee asked, pointing to the photo. Rose nodded, and Lee carefully removed it from the album. This is compelling evidence, but it still doesn't explain why she would target her old neighborhood for development, or why she'd be so cruel to Zoe. I think I might know, Rose said quietly. Before Robert died, he mentioned something about family money. Said his father had told him there was an inheritance from his grandparents that was supposed to be split between him and Denise. But after she was declared dead, it all went to Robert. He used it to buy our house outright. Lee's eyes widened. And if Diana is actually Denise, she couldn't claim that money without revealing she had faked her death. Which would be fraud, Rose finished. A crime. So instead, she's using her wealth and influence to take back what she thinks should have been hers. And then some, Lee concluded. By buying up properties, raising taxes, and forcing longtime residents out, she's not just erasing her past. She's getting revenge. The doorbell rang, startling them all. Are you expecting someone? Lee asked. Rose shook her head, looking concerned. Zoe moved to the intercom by the door. Hello? She called into it. Miss Williams? This is Keith Preston from Cornerstone Properties. We'd like to speak with you and your grandmother about an urgent matter regarding your housing situation. Zoe looked back at her grandmother and Lee with alarm. Don't let them in, Lee whispered. That's one of Diana's companies. Rose stood up, her earlier weariness replaced by determination. No, I want to hear what they have to say. Face to face. Mrs. Williams, I don't think that's wise, Lee cautioned. I've spent my entire life working hard and playing by the rules. Rose said firmly. I'm not going to hide in my own home from people who are trying to take it away from me. She turned to Zoe. Let them up, dear. Zoe hesitated but pressed the button to unlock the building's entrance. At least let me record this conversation, Lee said, taking out his phone. For your protection. Rose nodded her agreement just as a knock came at the apartment door. Zoe opened it to reveal two men in expensive suits. The older one, balding with a forced smile, spoke first. Mrs. Williams, I'm Keith Preston, Chief Operations Officer for Cornerstone Properties. This is my associate, Mr. Diaz. May we come in? We have a matter of some urgency to discuss. Concerning what? Rose asked, not moving from her spot. Preston's eyes flicked to Lee and his smile faltered slightly. It's a private matter regarding your tenancy. Perhaps we could speak alone? Mr. Chen is a friend of the family, Rose said. Anything you have to say can be said in front of him. Preston hesitated, then stepped into the apartment, followed by his colleague. Very well. Mrs. Williams, Cornerstone Properties has recently acquired this building from the previous landlord. We're planning extensive renovations, which unfortunately means all current tenants will need to relocate within 30 days. That's not legal, Lee interjected. Tenant protection laws require at least 90 days' notice, plus relocation assistance for elderly or low-income residents. Preston's smile disappeared completely. And you are? Lee Chen, City Chronicle. I'm working on a story about property development in Oak Meadows, specifically about how Diana Reeves is using shell companies like Cornerstone to drive out longtime residents, including her own family members. The two men exchanged glances. Diaz whispered something to Preston, who cleared his throat nervously. I don't know what you're talking about. Ms. Reeves is merely one of many investors in our parent company. She has no direct involvement in day-to-day operations. Really? Lee challenged. Then why is she having this building watched? He gestured toward the window where Diana's assistant could still be seen sitting in the car outside. Preston's composure slipped further. I'm not at liberty to discuss our investors or their activities. As for the eviction notice, we're not going anywhere, Rose interrupted, her voice strong despite her small stature. This building was my home after we lost our house. The house that should have gone to my granddaughter after her parents died. The house that's now a pile of rubble because your company demolished it last month. Mrs. Williams, I understand this is difficult, but business is business. We can offer a modest relocation fee. How much? Lee asked. Since Cornerstone and Diana Reeves have systematically destroyed this community, removed essential services, and targeted a family to whom Ms. Reeves has a personal connection, a connection she's hidden for decades, I'm curious what you think fair compensation would be. Preston's face had gone pale. These accusations are completely unfounded. If you print any of this, Ms. Reeves's attorneys will what? Came a voice from the doorway. All heads turned to see Diana Reeves herself standing there, immaculately dressed in a designer suit, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her expression cold. Diana, Preston stammered. We were just... Leave us, Diana ordered. The two men hurried past her without another word. For a long moment, Diana stood in the doorway, surveying the apartment with barely concealed disgust. Her gaze moved from Rose to Zoe, lingering on the girl's face, then finally settling on Lee. Mr. Chen, she said icily, I understand you've been asking questions about me. Digging into my past, spreading ridiculous theories. Lee held up his phone, still recording. Not theories, Ms. Reeves, facts. Facts about Denise Williams, who faked her death 25 years ago to escape her working-class origins and reinvent herself among the wealthy elite. Something flashed in Diana's eyes. Anger, fear, or perhaps both. I have no idea what you're talking about, don't you? Rose stepped forward. I may have only met you once, Denise, but I recognize those eyes. They're just like Robert's, like Zoe's. Diana's gaze flicked to Zoe again, then away quickly. This is absurd. I came here to personally offer the Williams family a generous relocation package out of the goodness of my heart, despite that girl's behavior at my event. And I find you spreading libelous nonsense. Why this neighborhood? Lee pressed. Of all the places you could develop, why focus so much attention and resources on Oak Meadows? Why close the only grocery store serving this community? Why target this specific building where your niece lives? Business decisions, Diana said dismissively. Nothing personal. Nothing personal? Rose's voice rose. You looked your own flesh and blood in the face and turned her away when she was hungry. You've been systematically destroying the neighborhood where you grew up. You've been watching this building, monitoring your own family. How is that not personal? Diana's perfectly composed facade began to crack. You know nothing about me or my life. I know that the inheritance that should have been split between you and Robert went entirely to him after you faked your death, Rose said. I know that he used it to buy the family home where Zoe should have grown up. I know that after he died, your shell company somehow ended up with the property and demolished it. Tell me again how that's not personal. Diana's hands clenched into fists at her sides. That money was rightfully mine. Half of it, at least. I didn't fake my death to get away from my family. I did it because I had to start over. I was young and made a mistake, a legal problem I couldn't fix. Disappearing was my only option. What kind of legal problem justifies abandoning your family and letting them think you were dead for 25 years? Lee asked. Diana's composed mask slipped completely. The kind that would have sent me to prison. I was working as a bookkeeper for a local business. I borrowed money. I was going to pay it back, but things got complicated. By the time I realized how serious it was, the amount was too large. The owner was going to press charges. So you ran, Rose said. And when you couldn't claim your inheritance because you were legally dead, you decided to take it all, not just your share, but everything. I built myself up from nothing, Diana hissed. Do you have any idea how hard I worked to become who I am today? To earn my place in society? Then I find out that my alcoholic father left everything to my brother, who never amounted to anything. It wasn't fair. My husband was a good man, Rose said quietly. He worked hard every day of his life. He loved his daughter. He mourned his sister. And yet here you are, Lee observed, one of the wealthiest women in the city, targeting your own family for displacement because of money you couldn't claim, without exposing your fraud. Diana straightened, attempting to regain her composure. You have no proof of any of this. It's all circumstantial. Actually, Lee said, I have quite a bit of evidence. Financial records connecting you to Cornerstone. Property records showing the systematic acquisition of Oak Meadows buildings. Birth records, school photos, the timing of Denise Williams's disappearance and Diana Reeves's appearance in society. And now this. He held up his phone. Your own admission recorded. The color drained from Diana's face. For the first time, she looked truly afraid. Zoe, who had been quietly watching this entire exchange, finally spoke. Why did you hate us so much? We never did anything to you. Diana looked at her niece, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. Something in her expression changed. A flicker of recognition, possibly even shame. I don't hate you, she said, her voice losing its hard edge. I just couldn't risk exposure. Couldn't risk losing everything I've built. So you decided we should lose everything instead. Zoe said simply. The truth of that statement hung in the air between them, undeniable in its simplicity. Lee closed his folder. Ms. Reeves, I'm running this story tomorrow. Diana Reeves's true identity, the targeting of Oak Meadows, all of it. You can't, Diana whispered. You'll ruin me. No, Lee corrected her. Your own actions have done that. The question now is whether you'll try to make amends or continue down this path. Diana looked around the small apartment, at the family photos on the walls, at Rose's proud but tired face, at Zoe's unwavering gaze. For a moment, something like recognition, or perhaps regret, flickered across her features. Then her expression hardened again. My attorneys will be in touch, Mr. Chen. She turned to leave, then paused at the door, looking back at her family one last time. In that moment, with her carefully constructed persona cracking under the weight of exposed truth, Diana Reeves looked more like Denise Williams than she had in 25 years. Without another word, she walked out, the door closing softly behind her. Rose sank back into her chair, suddenly looking every one of her years. What happens now? She asked Lee. Now, he said, the truth comes out, and Diana Reeves faces the consequences of her actions, both past and present. What none of them realized was that Diana was already on her phone in the hallway, making a call that would set in motion events none of them could have anticipated. It's me, she said tensely. We have a problem. A big one. I need you to take care of it. Tonight. Li Chen sat at his desk in the City Chronicle offices well past midnight, the glow of his computer screen illuminating his tired face. The office was nearly empty except for a few night editors and the cleaning staff. He had been writing for hours, carefully crafting the story that would expose Diana Reeves and potentially change the future of Oak Meadows. The headline stared back at him from his screen. Wealthy Philanthropist's Secret Past: How Diana Reeves Targeted Her Own Family and Real Estate Scheme. His phone buzzed with a text from Rose Williams. "Be careful." Diana seemed desperate when she left. Lee texted back a quick reassurance, though he shared her concern. People with wealth and power rarely surrendered either without a fight. Just as he was putting the finishing touches on his article, his editor, Judy Wong, appeared beside his desk. "Working late again, Chen?" she asked, peering at his screen. "This Diana Reeves story better be worth it." "It is," Lee assured her. "Everything's verified, sources are solid, and I have recordings to back it up. This could be the biggest story I've written." Judy nodded approvingly. "Good. But before you submit it, there's someone here to see you." Lee looked up in surprise. "At this hour?" "Says it's urgent." "About the Reeves story." Judy gestured toward the conference room. "I put him in there." Curious and slightly wary, Lee saved his work and headed to the conference room. Inside, a man in an expensive suit sat at the table, a leather briefcase in front of him. "Mr. Chen," the man said, rising to shake Lee's hand. "Howard Graham, legal counsel for the Reeves Foundation." Lee tensed but kept his expression neutral. "What can I do for you, Mr. Graham?" "I understand you're preparing to publish a story about Ms. Reeves tomorrow," Graham said, opening his briefcase. "Before you do, she wanted me to share some information with you." "If this is an attempt to stop the story—" "Not at all," Graham interrupted smoothly. "Ms. Reeves merely wants to ensure that all the facts are accurately represented, including these." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were official-looking documents: property deeds, bank transfers, and a formal letter on Reeves Foundation letterhead. "What is this?" Lee asked, scanning the papers. "As of 2 hours ago, ownership of all Cornerstone properties in Oak Meadows has been transferred to a community land trust," Graham explained. "The grocery store building has been leased back to Food Basket at a nominal rate with a 20-year guaranteed term. All pending evictions have been canceled, and a fund has been established to assist residents with property tax payments for the next 5 years. Lee looked up from the documents, suspicious. Why would Diana do this now? Graham's professional smile didn't reach his eyes. Ms. Reeves has had a change of perspective. She realizes certain business decisions may have inadvertently harmed the community. Inadvertently? Lee repeated incredulously. There was nothing inadvertent about what she did. Be that as it may, Graham continued, she would like to make amends. In addition to the property transfers, she's establishing a college fund for her niece, Zoe Williams, and providing financial support to ensure Mrs. Rose Williams never has to work again if she chooses not to. Lee flipped through the documents, verifying their authenticity. They appeared legitimate. These are significant concessions, but they don't erase what she's done or who she really is. Ms. Reeves understands that. She's prepared to publicly acknowledge her past as Denise Williams and the mistakes she made. She's not asking you to kill the story, Mr. Chen. She's asking for a chance to explain her side. Lee sat back considering. Why the sudden change of heart? Just hours ago she was threatening legal action. Graham closed his briefcase with a click. I can't speak to Ms. Reeves' personal feelings. I'm simply conveying her offer. She's prepared to give you an exclusive interview, the full story of her past, her connection to Oak Meadows, and her plans for making amends. When? Now, tonight, she's waiting to speak with you. Lee hesitated. Journalistic instinct told him to be wary of last-minute attempts to control a narrative. But if Diana was truly willing to come clean and help the community she'd harmed, I'll hear what she has to say, he decided. But the story runs one way or another, Graham nodded. That's all she asks. My car is waiting downstairs. Lee sent a quick text to his editor explaining where he was going, then followed Graham out of the building. Outside, a sleek black car waited by the curb. The driver opened the door, and Lee slid into the back seat, finding Diana Reeves already seated inside. She looked different from their earlier confrontation, less imperious, so how smaller. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the redness around her eyes. Mr. Chen, she said quietly, as the car pulled away from the curb. Thank you for agreeing to hear me out. Lee took out his phone. Do you mind if I record this conversation? Please do, Diana agreed. I want everything on the record from now on. No more secrets. As the car drove through the quiet nighttime streets, Diana began to speak. She told Lee about growing up in Oak Meadows, about feeling trapped in a life she hadn't chosen, about the desperation that led to her embezzling funds from her employer. I was 22 and terrified of going to prison, she explained. A friend helped me create a new identity. The plan was to disappear for a while until things blew over, then come back. But then I met Harold Reeves. He was wealthy, powerful, attracted to me. Suddenly I had a chance at a completely different life. So you became Diana, Lee said. She nodded. The longer I lived as Diana, the harder it became to imagine going back. Years passed. My parents died thinking I was dead. Robert got married, had a child. My old life seemed more and more distant. Until you saw an opportunity to take back what you thought should have been yours, Lee observed. Diana looked out the window, her reflection ghost-like against the dark glass. It wasn't just about the money. It was about erasing the past. Oak Meadows represented everything I'd left behind. The struggle, the limitations, the person I used to be. I told myself I was improving the neighborhood through development. But the truth is, I wanted to remake it in my new image. The car turned onto a familiar street, and Lee realized they were heading toward Oak Meadows. Where are we going? He asked. There's someone else I need to talk to, Diana said. Someone who deserves to hear this directly from me. Minutes later, the car pulled up in front of Rose and Zoe's apartment building. Diana looked at it for a long moment before speaking again. I've spent 25 years running from who I really am, she said quietly. When I saw Zoe at the restaurant, I knew immediately who she was. She has Robert's eyes, my father's eyes. I panicked. If she recognized me, if anyone started asking questions, so you had her thrown out. Diana flinched at his words. Yes, it was cruel and inexcusable. I've spent my life cultivating a certain image, playing a role so convincingly that I almost believed it myself. But seeing Zoe that night, something cracked inside me. Lee studied her carefully. Why should I believe this transformation? Just hours ago, you were threatening legal action to stop my story. Because empty threats are easier than facing the truth, Diana admitted. After I left Rose's apartment today, I sat in my car for an hour, just thinking about what I'd become, about what my brother would think of me now, about what my parents would say. Her voice broke slightly. I realized I've been hiding from myself for so long that I don't even know who I am anymore. They got out of the car and approached the building. Diana hesitated at the entrance. They may not want to see me, she said. Probably not, Lee agreed. But you still owe them this conversation. Diana nodded and pressed the intercom button for the Williams apartment. Hello? Came Zoe's voice, sounding sleepy. Zoe, it's Lee Chen. I'm sorry to wake you. Diana Reeves is with me. She'd like to speak with you and your grandmother if you're willing. There was a long silence before Zoe responded. Let me ask Grandma. The wait seemed interminable. Finally, the intercom buzzed, unlocking the door. When they reached apartment 3B, Rose was waiting in the doorway, her expression guarded. Zoe stood behind her grandmother, curious but wary. May we come in? Lee asked. Rose nodded silently, stepping aside to let them enter. The apartment felt different at night, more intimate, the family photos on the walls seeming to watch them with judgment in their frozen eyes. No one sat. Diana stood in the center of the small living room, looking more out of place in her designer outfit than she had earlier. I owe you both an apology, she began, though I know words aren't enough. No, they're not, Rose agreed. Not after everything you've done. Diana nodded in acknowledgement. I've spent the last few hours trying to undo some of the damage. The building is yours now, yours and the other tenants. I've created a community land trust to protect it from development. The grocery store is coming back. And there's a trust fund for Zoe's education, plus financial security for you, Rose. Rose's expression didn't change. You think money fixes this? You let your own brother die thinking you were dead. You let your niece grow up without knowing her aunt existed. You tried to destroy the only home she's ever known. I know, Diana said, her composure cracking. I can't change the past. I can only try to make a better future. Zoe stepped forward. Why did you hate us so much? The simple question, asked without anger, just genuine confusion, seemed to hit Diana harder than all of Rose's rightful accusations. I never hated you, Zoe, Diana said, her voice soft. I hated myself, who I used to be, where I came from. I spent so long pretending to be someone else that I couldn't bear any reminders of the truth. Zoe considered this. So when you saw me at the restaurant, I recognized you immediately, Diana admitted. You look so much like your father, like my brother. It terrified me. I reacted badly, cruelly. That's an understatement, Rose muttered. Diana turned to her. Rose, I know you have no reason to forgive me. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I am asking for a chance to try to make things right. Not just with money, but with actions. And what kind of actions? Rose asked skeptically. I'm going public with everything, Diana said. Who I really am. What I did. The mistakes I've made. Mr. Chen is going to help me tell the truth. Lee nodded in confirmation. She's agreed to a full interview. No conditions. Rose looked between them. And what happens after the story comes out? You might face charges for fraud, identity theft, maybe even the original embezzlement. I know, Diana acknowledged. I've instructed my attorneys to cooperate fully with any investigation. If I have to face legal consequences, so be it. Zoe moved closer, studying her aunt's face. You're really my dad's sister? The one in the old pictures? Diana nodded, emotion visible in her eyes. Yes, I missed watching him grow up. I missed knowing you. That's my greatest regret. For the first time, Rose's expression softened slightly. Robert always said you were the smart one, that you'd go far someday. A tear slipped down Diana's cheek. He was the good one, always looking out for others, even as a kid. Like Zoe, Rose said quietly. Diana looked at her niece with new eyes. Yes, I see that now. The tension in the room gradually began to ease. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first tentative step toward understanding. Lee watched this family reunion with a journalist's eye, knowing he was witnessing something remarkable. The story had evolved from one about greed and deception to something more complex, about identity, redemption, and the possibility of change. As dawn approached, the four of them sat at the small kitchen table, cups of tea growing cold as they talked. Diana shared stories of her childhood with Robert, filling in gaps in Zoe's knowledge of her father. Rose spoke of how she'd met Robert and their life together. Zoe showed Diana her school art projects and talked about her dreams for the future. When the first light of morning filtered through the windows, Lee checked his watch. I should get to the office. The paper goes to print in a few hours. Diana nodded. I'm ready. The story will include everything, Lee warned. The good and the bad. As it should, Diana agreed. She turned to Rose and... Zoe, this is just the beginning. I have a lot to make up for. Rose regarded her thoughtfully. Actions speak louder than words, Denise. Diana smiled faintly at the use of her birth name. Yes, they do. 1 week later, the front page of the City Chronicle bore the headline, Philanthropist Diana Reeves reveals hidden past, pledges to rebuild Oak Meadows. The story detailed Diana's journey from Denise Williams to Diana Reeves, the years of deception, the targeting of her old neighborhood, and her eventual change of heart. It was accompanied by a photograph of Diana standing with Rose and Zoe in front of the reopened Food Basket grocery store, surrounded by community members. The public reaction was mixed. Some praised Diana's courage in coming forward. Others condemned her past actions. Legal inquiries were opened into her financial dealings and her original crime of embezzlement. Though the statute of limitations had long expired on the latter, Diana accepted it all with a grace she had never truly possessed as the artificial Diana Reeves. She stepped down from leadership of her foundation, but directed its resources toward genuine community development efforts, with input from actual residents. She appeared at community meetings in Oak Meadows, at first met with hostility, but gradually earning grudging respect for her willingness to listen and learn. The most significant change, however, was in her relationship with Rose and Zoe. It began with awkward weekend visits and gradually evolved into genuine connection. Diana couldn't replace the years lost, but she could be present for the years ahead. 3 months after the story broke, Lee visited Oak Meadows to follow up on developments. He found Diana in the community center that now occupied what had once been an abandoned building, owned by Cornerstone Properties. She was helping Zoe with her homework while Rose taught a cooking class in the center's kitchen. How's it going? Lee asked, pulling up a chair. Diana looked up from the math problem they were solving. One day at a time. Some days are harder than others. The fraud charges? Lee guessed. She nodded. My attorneys think we can reach an agreement. Community service, financial restitution. It helps that I've been cooperating fully. And how about, Lee gestured around them, at the neighborhood she had once tried to destroy. Diana glanced at Zoe, who was erasing a calculation to try again. It's strange. For years, I was terrified of anyone discovering where I came from. Now that everyone knows, it's actually freeing. You're not afraid of your past anymore, Lee observed. No, Diana agreed. I'm just trying to make peace with it. Zoe looked up from her homework. Aunt Denise is helping us organize a neighborhood festival next month. You should come, Mr. Chen, Lee smiled. I wouldn't miss it. As he left the community center, Lee passed a bulletin board covered with flyers for upcoming events. Job training programs, health clinics, after-school activities. At the center was a notice for the Oak Meadows Renaissance Project, a community-led development initiative to improve the neighborhood while preserving its character and protecting current residents. Outside, the sidewalks were being repaired. The storefronts that had stood empty were showing signs of life again. Residents greeted each other by name as they went about their daily routines. Oak Meadows was healing. And so it seemed was the family at the heart of Lee's story. Diana Reeves, or Denise Williams, as she increasingly allowed herself to be called, had lost her carefully constructed facade of wealth and privilege. But in its place she was finding something she had spent 25 years running from, her true self, and that, Lee reflected as he walked through the neighborhood that had revealed its secrets to him, was a far more valuable inheritance than any she had sought to reclaim.